Fireside. I wouldn't call myself a superstitious person. If you asked someone off the street if they were superstitious, they'd probably say the same. I don't know how much I'd agree with them, though. I think people are generally superstitious, but in small ways. They might believe in minor phenomena, a lucky token, a coincidental phone call. But when something inexplicable happens, they search far and wide for reasons to either justify the event or correlate it to something unrelated. Like when you see a clip of The Simpsons that seemingly predicted the future, or that guy who won the lottery and then, when reenacting the event for the local news, won the lottery again, all of which occurred a year after he was hospitalized from a heart condition and declared clinically dead for almost 15 minutes. His name's Bill Morgan. Look it up. Some people would call him lucky. Previously, I'd call him a victim of mathematically improbable circumstances and coincidences. And coincidences are just patterns that we haven't figured out yet. Nowadays, I'm not so sure. There were any number of reasons that I was distracted that night. The forests around Mount St. Helens were damp and cold. It was November, just after the first frost of the winter season. It made camping difficult, but not impossible. The dead wood I'd collected for the fire was all drenched and semi-frozen, making me rely on the fire starters that I brought for this very reason. The fire was loud, hissing as the water steamed and expanded, splintering the wood with loud pops and cracks. I had to keep a close eye on the fire, keeping it fueled so that it would last the night. I'd managed to sneak out of Redmond for an extended weekend camp, finding a small string of 3 days of respite from the rain. I wanted to get at least one more trip in before winter truly arrived and ended my season. I trusted the forecast, but on the off chance I got caught in the rain, I would be thanking my past self for the work I did now. I might not be superstitious, but I wasn't a fool, despite what Avery might say. Though we were on a break right now, so I tried not to think too much about what she might think, especially not here. I camped to escape my troubles, not dwell on them. Kiefer, the rotty lab mix that stole my heart, sat by the fire with his reward from our hike today. He'd somehow found a massive tree branch, maybe twice his size, and insisted on dragging it back. I'd tried to make him leave the stick, but his stubbornness apparently outweighed my insistence, so I let him drag the beast of a branch all the way back. It must have been worth it, as he's been gnawing on its end since we arrived at the site, without a care in the world. I didn't recognize the wood, but I didn't let that bother me. I've been camping in the forests surrounding Mount St. Helens since childhood, and I knew the plants that would have caused Kiefer any issues. But the only thing that caused me pause was that it appeared shaped. The branch was debarked and delimbed, leaving only the smooth wood underneath, knotty and knurled, but mostly straight. I suspected that it was somebody's walking stick, but looking back, I shouldn't have settled for that. It was much too long, much too big to be a stick someone would carry on a long hike. But I didn't realize that till later, with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, I was too busy breaking one of my sacred tenets of the campsite. I was thinking about my troubles. Specifically, I was thinking about the last conversation I had with Avery. I'll spare you the details, but safe to say, we both fucked it up pretty royally. I'll admit, I'm not the most open or trusting person. My mom always said I had the mind of a skeptic but wasn't smart enough to keep it to myself. To most people I meet, I come off as either off-putting or abrasive. It's been a while since I stopped trying to mitigate that conclusion. Avery is probably the closest I've been to anyone outside my immediate family, but even that relationship is on the rocks. She thinks that I'm closed off and afraid of connection. I disagree, but actions speak louder than words, and to briefly paraphrase her thoughts, you're a dick. I know she didn't mean it. It was the last text I saw from her before shutting my phone off and leaving it in the car. A bad move while camping, I know, but I just didn't want to deal with it all. I camped to get away from it all, and my pocket-sized tether to the outside world kept dragging it all back into my thoughts. Leaving it in the car was the perfect way to snip the thread, letting me depart into the forest by myself. Well, aside from Kiefer. Kiefer was the one to rouse me from my thoughts, as his baritone growl rumbled through my chest. He'd stopped chewing on the branch, shifting to look past the fire. His eyes were locked on something I couldn't see as he slowly raised his hackles. I squinted into the darkness, searching for whatever caught his attention. Bears and mountain lions aren't uncommon in the forest, but in my experience, they stayed out of this area. I'd only ever encountered them from afar, and on the opposite side of the Gifford-Pinchot forests, several hundred acres away from where I was now. It was probably an overly curious marmot, or maybe a deer that strayed too close. The smell should have let me know something was off. Gradually, like an ocean's fog rolling in from calm seas, a strange odor began wafting over the campsite. The easiest comparison is wet dog, but to simply imagine the smell of any household canine would be misleading. It was damp, dank, like the smell of deepest caves. The strangest part of the smell was that it smelled old. Faintly, buried beneath the stench of dog, was the smallest sense of old soil, dried wood, tall pines. It doesn't make sense to try and imagine it now, but it's the only way I've thought of putting it into words. It was familiar, but indescribable. Intimate, but alien. But I hadn't noticed it yet. The smoke of the fire must have overwhelmed my nose, but not Kiefer's. His ears were perched forward on his head, still locked onto the one spot, just past the light of the fire and the edge of my vision. I hadn't heard any rustling, but just to be safe, I began inching towards my bag, where my bear spray was attached to the outside. It was just out of reach, and I blindly pawed around for the bag, still searching the darkness for any sign of, well, anything, really. Another few moments passed, and I still hadn't grasped the bag, so I turned around to find where it had gotten to. Snap. My head whipped back around to the source of the noise, the cracking of a branch, only to see a pair of yellow eyes staring back at me out of the darkness, right where Kiefer had been looking. His growling had begun again, much more intently this time. Thankfully, I had managed to locate my bag with a brief glance, so I leaned in its direction and snagged the handle. I had begun to drag it back towards me, readying to grab the bear spray when the eyes began to move. Not to approach me, not to back away, no. The eyes began to rise. They'd started maybe 1.5 feet off the ground, but I could only stare as they rose to be 3 feet, 5, 7, and then finally settling at what must have been 9 feet high. It was only then that they approached, and their owner stepped into the light of the fire. I know what you're thinking. Surely I must be mistaken. I was high, right? Or drunk? It was nighttime. I was preoccupied with the stresses of life, and stress makes the mind think crazy things, right? I know those thoughts, because I thought them. But I know what I saw, and you would too. Sasquatch. Everything you'd expect. Muscles rippling underneath dense, dark brown fur. Legs as thick as tree trunks, with arms to match. Its eyes glowed an eerie yellow, the campfire causing them to flicker and pulse. It had wet soil across its knuckles, meaning that it must have approached on all fours before moving to stand. Its face was oddly humanoid, but completely unsettling. It was entirely unrecognizable, as if I was looking at an alternate version of a human. I was frozen, unable to move. Kiefer's ears had snapped back, obviously unsettled by the Sasquatch's presence. It took maybe 2 steps and covered the entire 15 feet between the tree line and the campsite before stopping. It stared at us for a long while, neither party moving. When it did move, I nearly jumped out of my skin as it raised its arm towards us. I had flinched away, but when I glanced back, the Sasquatch was pointing at Kiefer, eliciting a defensive growl from the dog. It only reacted by dropping its hand, curling back into a fist. I instinctively reached down and began petting Kiefer, trying to calm him down. The last thing I needed was his skittishness provoking the Sasquatch, considering they could probably kill us both with a simple squeeze of its massive hands. The Sasquatch watched me do this, seemingly waiting for me to calm the dog. My every instinct was petrified by the creature standing in the clearing, but something deep within me grew curious. Why was it here? Sasquatches are legend for a reason. They avoid contact at all costs. So what drew it here? They raised their arm once again and pointed at Kiefer. Confused, I looked down at the dog, only to realize what it was pointing at. The branch. The wood that I didn't recognize, the debarked and shaped branch, must have been theirs, and I'd been letting my dog chew on it. God, I hoped Sasquatch wasn't materialistic. I grabbed the branch and tentatively held it out to the creature. Its weight strained my arm, and I once again found myself cursing the dog's stubbornness. The Sasquatch seemed relieved as it took the branch back, running its hands up and down the smooth wood. It seemed to pause near the handle, where Kiefer had been focusing his chewing. I held my breath as it looked between Kiefer and the handle. After seemingly concluding its internal debate, it palmed the handle and snapped off the branch with a sharp crack, as if it was snapping a twig. Then, with the same tentativeness I showed it, it held out the knurled ball of wood back to me. Considering I couldn't become more shocked with the circumstances of the situation, I was relatively quick in grabbing the knotted wood from their hand. They paused as I examined the piece, before gesturing back to Kiefer. I set the piece down in front of the dog, which he readily latched onto and resumed his gnawing. Uncontrollably, I began to laugh at the absurdity of the whole situation. The tension that had frozen the campground shattered in an instant, and I suddenly relaxed like I never had before. Surprisingly, the Sasquatch joined me, a hearty chuckle resonating across the warm air of the fire and echoing into the forest beyond. As the laughter dwindled and silence resumed its reign, the Sasquatch had one more gift for Kiefer. Without a sound, the cryptid stretched across the gap and patted the mud on the head. Kiefer huffed with satisfaction as he leaned into the scratches. I watched, mouth agape, as I saw the single most strange and alien creature do one of the most human things I'd ever seen. Hell, from a distance, nothing would look out of place. A mountain man and his dog. I blinked, thinking my eyes were betraying me, only to miss the Sasquatch turning away and beginning his retreat to the forest. I wanted to say something, to reach out and stop him from leaving, but I was frozen in place. As he reached the tree line, something made him stop. I couldn't discern what it was, but the Sasquatch turned and looked back at the camp. I'm bad at reading emotions. It was always something I struggled with. But I saw something in the Sasquatch's eyes that I recognized immediately. Through the tousled and tangled hair, his eyes gleamed like dun jewels, a dull luminescence that cut a faded glow through the dark backdrop. But even among such alien features, the disquieted look was intimately familiar, as it was the same look I saw every morning in my own eyes. But, with a blink, he was gone. Swallowed by the forests. And I was left in the dwindling glow of a dying fire as Kiefer gnawed away at his gift. I sat there for a while, unable to move. I wanted to stoke the fire, jump for joy, scream to the heavens, cackle in relief, but I could only feel my ocean of emotions toil underneath my skin, threatening to burst out, but only just. And so I sat, let the fire die, fed Kiefer, went to bed. Woke up the next day, unable to put my finger on why I was feeling this way. It stuck with me for the rest of the weekend, and the rest of the next week, and the rest of the next month. And later on, after I had finally repaired things with Avery, after I had gone camping several more times, and after Kiefer passed on, I finally realized what that tension was. As people, we rarely see the ways that we leave marks on others. I never thought that I left lasting impressions on people. I would think that I skated through moments unnoticed. But we never see the person that hears our name and smiles to themselves as they remember something small that we said that stuck with them. Or when they laugh at a passing joke they're reminded of, years after it's been told. We miss how our kindness gave someone warmth on a day when there was none to find. There's always someone out there who thinks about the discussions that remain as echoes in their mind. It is easier to assume that we are simply passing through life, but there is always someone out there who treasures the little things, the things we don't even think about, because we leave pieces of ourselves behind even when we don't notice it. Sometimes, we need to trust that people are holding on to those pieces because we cannot live this life alone. We need to have faith that people are willing to believe in more than what they can prove, and that they are willing to accept you for who you are, even if they don't have all the pieces. I used to think I wasn't a superstitious person. Really, I was a person that didn't trust in chance. I didn't trust that people would give me a chance. I didn't believe in things that I couldn't touch, whether it's trust in someone else or ghosts in the night. But what I learned that night is that the things we can't see, the beliefs we place our faith in, the pieces of others that we hold, those are what make up our relationships with others. The pieces of ourselves that we keep are nothing but amorphous glimpses of who we are. It is through others that we become whole. And the beautiful part is that we can always find more. Just because we may have left pieces behind with jagged edges doesn't mean that we can't make more. So now, when people ask me what I think of Bill Morgan, I know my answer. He's lucky.